And then I will also
Yay.
share my screen here with all of you.
Hi, Steve.
Morning, Carol. Great to see you, Scott, Gary. Sheila, even though it's just Sheila's picture.
Hi, I'm here.
That's what Carl.
So let's, just so we all kind of know, I know some of you are new to this call. Let's just, if you want to drop in the chat which club you're from and what your role is, that would be great. And that's especially helpful if you hear someone share a really good idea, look back through the chat, find out what club they're from, and then reach out to them so that you can share that idea. And so while you're all introducing yourselves, look at MJ. She's also, you know, our district governor, but, you know, probably her first love is being a member of Zanesville Daybreak, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll kind of go ahead and get started today. As you know, we've been alternating each month between a learning topic, more of a seminar style, and then a roundtable. And we've, based on feedback from participants, having kind of an anchor topic with the roundtable seems to be helpful. So today, you know, last month we talked about each one bring one and how much success we've been seeing with that. And so this month we decided, you know, kind of let's level up a little bit and start talking about retention, because I know that's a priority for membership chairs and for presidents is, you know, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of momentum when we're pulling new people into our organization and introducing new people to Rotary. And then also on the other side of that, we're thinking, okay, but we want to keep the people that we have that have already invested in Rotary and that have been a part of our organization. We want to keep bringing value to them so that they, you know, remain a part of our clubs as well. So this is really meant to be idea sharing. I do have a couple of topic questions. If we get a little stumped, if there's a lull, I'll ask some questions that I'll, you know, problem solving questions. And then that always gets everyone talking. So I do want to just share with you all, I start most of the roundtables this way, but I do want to share with all of you kind of where we are this year as of December 14th. And like disclaimer, I pulled these off of our DAC-DB reports. So they're not necessarily final and they don't necessarily match up with the RI report. And it's just because of the lag in reporting and sometimes there's a duplicate, but it's just the fastest report for me to pull really quickly. So it does give you a pretty good snapshot of we are compared to last year, we're in pretty decent shape. And to kind of give you an idea, we've added just over about 180 new members since July 1. And last year at the same time, the same date, we'd added just under 80. I think we'd added 79 at this date. So I think that definitely speaks to how hard our club presidents, club membership chairs, and really all members of clubs are working to just introduce people to Rotary and pull them in. And so I think that is really exciting. And then when we look at terminations, we're sitting at about 120 terminations to date. And in last year, we were about 20 above that. So I think we're in good shape comparatively. All of you have done this before, so you know July 1st, we might expect some additional, or excuse me, January 1st, we might expect some additional shifting of these numbers as those RI bills start to go out. But just to give you a snapshot of where we are, I think the trend, which is what I think we should be looking at, the trend is very promising. So, but also still, you know, work to be done. So I thought I'd start by asking some questions of when do you think people leave? You know, how long, you know, when you think about your own club or other club experiences, and feel free to unmute or just drop it in the chat, but how long do you think someone's a member, you know, before they decide to leave? just based on your own experiences. There's no right or wrong here.
I think I've heard that people usually leave within the first year or 18 months.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely, yep, definitely true. And Christy shares, it depends on the age demographic of your club. Christy, would you mind like unmuting and expanding a little bit? Because I think that's a good insight.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at the terms on our club, they are young professionals relocating for jobs in new areas, new parents. Our average age in our club is, comparatively a little younger than some of the other clubs. And so our terms are related to kind of random time periods of life experiences. And so I think that plays a heavy role in that time period. I think if it were just strictly a lack of engagement and that happens at the 18 to 2-year marker, that would make sense. But I don't necessarily think that's always the case. I think it just depends on your age demographic.
Yeah, good insight. Thanks, Christy. And then Steve shares kind of within that 2 years of joining. Yeah, that's definitely the profile that we see. Anyone else have anything to add or thoughts?
I have a thought, because I agree with Christy that, especially when you have younger persons, and, families are growing. I guess my question to all of you is, Christy, do you think there's a way to, as someone says, family obligations are causing me to leave, not that I don't like Rotary per se, is there a way to kind of create a satellite club or something where of young families, especially if they're in your club and enjoying it, and saying, hey, why don't you guys get together and enjoy Rotary in this way with other family, similar families?
Yeah, I mean, that would be, because what I hear mostly is the guilt, they see all of these, base camp messages or email messages that are coming through about all of the cool things that the club members that are doing. And I think that, like someone starting a new job and having to focus on that, or having a new child, or maybe a relationship that's in trouble, or whatever things that might happen at that younger age, they watch that email circulation or those updates and they feel guilty. And so they're sort of taking one thing off of their plate that is causing that guilt. And we see people that stop showing up for clubs regularly have one of those big life changes. And I think I think our club does a great job of trying to just, hey, come when you can. But if there was a way for them to involve that aspect of that change of their life, like a new parent, group or something along those lines. I mean, I know there's lots of, the word is escaping me. Jenny, help me out. What's the word? The little groups that get together about a special topic.
Oh, like fellowships.
Yeah, fellowship. Thank you. Like a fellowship centered around that. Maybe that would give them shed that guilt piece off because they're with like-minded, or but yeah, I think generally it's the guilt of just being ashamed, not being able to participate at the level that their peers are.
Christy, you make a good point. I have seen a lot of what I call Rotary guilt on people not being able to participate to the extent that they think they should be participating. And that goes over the entire age spectrum. In our club that's a little older, I see a lot of people having the Rotary guilt and then resigning after they retire. Don't get me started. But one of the things I always talk about with people who I feel like have that guilt is I talk to them about the ebbs and flows of what I see as someone's membership, and you're not always going to have this be able to be engaged at the same level 365 days a year for name the number of years. And so I try to work through that with them and tell them, sometimes you're going to have to step away for a little while, and we understand that. And like you said, be there when you can be there. I've actually told people I'd rather see them at a service project than at a Monday lunch, and bring your families with you. So those kind of things have worked for us, but you hit the nail on the head. I see a lot of resignations because of the perceived guilt that they're not as engaged as as the 20% that they see are engaged.
I like that comment though, the one about, starting the conversation right after they join about, hey, you are going to ebb and flow. Everybody does it. That's something that we don't do a great job of, that I think would be a good thing to add.
Jenny,
That's
do
original to
clubs?
me. I had a past president now who really didn't get involved until a few years before he came and became president, and he had been in the club 20 some years. But his business kept him away from being that active. And it wasn't until he started, semi-retirement that he was able to start thinking about being an officer and doing some stuff like that. So
Yeah, Scott and I are on the same page because we talk a lot about membership development. And I put in the chat box that there is a direct relationship between value of one's membership and engagement. And I think we have an extremely much different sort of challenge, since we're all coming off of, I assume we're all coming off of a year of Zoom meetings, and then getting people re-engaged and back involved again is a real challenge, because they haven't been coming to meetings for a year, and some chose to be on Zoom, some chose not to be. They don't like Zoom. So this is a much different challenge, having this conversation now than it might have been 3 or 4 years ago,
Yeah.
because of the fact that we're not meeting in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Carl. And Scott and Christy. And then Gary, I think you had something, and then I'll go to MJ. I see her hand up.
Do clubs have retention chairman specifically? I think there should be a person specifically given the responsibility of retention, onboarding and retention, and not being part of the membership committee, but that's their job, to check in with every member that's not coming, and not in a guilt way. But our example is a friend of mine that got real sick, and I was in touch with her, but no one in the leadership, the board or the president, ever asked her why she wasn't coming. And now she's on leave of absence, and because it just generally hurt her feelings. So if you have one person that's in charge, that's all they do. They're part of the orientation, but they continue with the onboarding, they continue with the retention.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Gary. And I know some clubs have that. They have quite a bit of depth in their kind of membership team. So they have one person whose just kind of job is doing that check-in. And then I know other clubs during the pandemic started like board buddies type programs, where they would go through the membership roster and kind of assign, 5 members to each board member to create those personal check-ins. But I think, your point of making that a more evergreen appointment probably makes a lot of sense, just to be, kind of checking in and completing that feedback loop continuously. So that's a great point. MJ, your hand is
Yeah.
patiently raised.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to kind of share. So we're seeing tremendous growth in our club. We're getting a lot of young female individuals joining our club, and it's very interesting. So when we ask the question, who's leaving in our club, it appears that some of the older individuals, the members that have been in our club for maybe founding members or, shortly after, they're the ones that seem to be leaving the club. And it was interesting. We had a comment from one of our past presidents, and she made a comment about how many women and how many young people were being added to the club. And so there seems to be a little bit of a concern, but I do know that COVID is a big deal. I think some of the individuals that have left, they're just not comfortable still. Being in person, and Zoom is not something that they enjoy. So they just figure, well, I'm just not going to be a member anymore because, I'm not comfortable coming out even to do a service project. But so we're seeing more of a trend where it's the older demographic seems to be leaving. And so I just kind of reverse almost.
Yeah, that's a good point. So great. Well, so you all know that I'm a super nerd. So of course I would have a chart to show you. So this is actually for our entire district up through December. So the numbers aren't, today current, but they're, at least give you a pretty good picture of, we have a pretty even mix. I think that, 1 to, 4 mark That's definitely an area, that's this kind of area, you know, on 1 to 2 and 3 to 5. I think that's definitely an area of, you know, room for growing, and room for resource development there. As many of you know, a lot of our district level membership strategy has been built around strengthening our ability to engage in those kind of early years of membership. But also looking here, you know, kind of this over 10 years, to MJ's point, you know, I've been pretty outspoken over, you know, the time that I've been in this role, that, you know, making sure that we're keeping the pulse and taking the temperature of all of our members. I think that it's great to have clubs that lean one direction or another, but I also think some of the most dynamic clubs are multi-generational clubs that really pull in those perspectives. And, you know, create that kind of healthy challenge within the club structure. So I do think sometimes, at least, you know, in my role as volunteering with membership at the district, is really to kind of taking 2 or 3 steps back and looking at, okay, how are we offering, you know, support to all of these areas? But I went down a couple of years just so you could see trends over the years. And these are all these are each year as of, you know, as of December, to give you kind of an idea of what that looks like. So then the next question that always comes up, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but it's, why do people leave Rotary? So of course, super nerd, have a chart for that too. And so these are, but I say, let's be cautious with this chart, because these are the reasons that a club secretary, a club president, or a club membership chair checked when they terminated the person's profile in the database. So I'm not certain that these necessarily always reflect the real reason why someone leaves. And, you know, you guys are all probably sitting there thinking, oh gosh, when someone says business obligations, they could mean any variety of things. You know, when they say personal, it could mean any variety of things. And then we have miscellaneous. So who knows what goes in that box. So beyond, you know, if you were to dig a little deeper and unpack some of these reasons, what are some ideas you have? And feel free to hypothesize, you know, talk in general terms. Obviously, I don't want anyone to take anything personally, but I do want us to be able to have a pretty frank conversation. Price's hand is up, and then we'll go to Gary.
We went through a process like this with the 2 Zanesville clubs a couple of years ago. We were trying to identify people who had left the clubs and why they had left, and whether they might find a reason to re-engage under either in one of the existing clubs or under a different structure, like a satellite club or something like that. And what we found is exactly what you were saying, Jenny, is that the reasons that get entered for someone's departure from Rotary are really not telling the whole story about what the causes are, and they're varied, of course, but it seems to me, and having looked at some of the real situations in that case, that they've lost their connection. Maybe they never got it. Maybe they never established the connection. I mean, that's why we see people leaving in the 1 to 2 year or you know, beyond or shorter range. They never made that connection where if something happens, if they have an illness, if they have a job change, if they have a COVID, you know, situation where they're just not able to participate as much in the club activities, they've never established the connection to really buy into that value proposition. That is, you know, this is where I'm going to give my time. This is where I'm going to give my money. And so if you don't establish that, and you know, a big part of why I joined Rotary was for service. A big reason why I stay in Rotary is relationships. And so, and I think that's true for a lot of people. And it just goes back to that whole idea of are we getting people connected? And everything that was been offered earlier about checking in and monitoring and retention chairs and things like that, those are all great tools to try to get at that point.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Bryce. We'll go to Gary and then Jess Ryan. I see her hands up. So Gary first.
Well, I think an exit interview and a more in-depth kind of investigation as to why they're leaving is part of that retention chair's job. I mean, they've got to follow through with those that have left to see if there's, wasn't a personal reason or somebody said something or whatever. And you might get one come back now and then, but I think that's, again, the responsibility of a retention chair.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I'm dropping a link in the chat right now. Rotary actually has a template for exit surveys and exit interviews. So I'm dropping that link in there for you. Yeah, but great point. And to that point, before we get to Jess, we also have Shannon Hemmerly on the district membership team, and she works on engaging alumni membership. So one piece of that is we're trying to look for opportunities to engage program alumni, but she's also connecting with any member who leaves a club and essentially helps, if they want, we try to learn a little bit more about why they left and navigate them to a new club. So, someone was moving to Florida and she tracked down a club in the place where they were going to be moving in Florida to connect them. And then similarly within our district, if someone moves from Athens to Columbus, she's, working with them to figure out which Central Ohio club makes the most sense. And that all kind of starts with that communication that goes out each month from her. But yeah, I threw a template in there if you want to get some inspiration for an exit survey, but great point, Gary. Jess, I see your hand up.
Morning. I think one of the things that I've noticed with active members and inactive members is that if they come in and it's not professionally beneficial to them, they might leave because their company has some type of ROI, right? So if you become a Rotary member and you don't end up getting any business in that first year, you might leave. Now, if you're completely engaged and you care about the cause and, we've done a good job at that, wonderful. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful to have something about that, because we have a personal reason thing, but we don't have a professional reason box. And I would think that that's a lot of people. Some of our very active members have said to me before, I joined this to get leads and I haven't gotten a single one because we're so service above self. We don't talk about our companies very much internally. So we've also been trying to discuss a way to get around that to where we can make it so when you come in and you're doing fellowship before we have our program, that you can talk a little bit about your company and things like that and get the word out. Like I work for the United Way, so I can send out appeals to Rotarians. It's just not something we necessarily focus on when we're there. We're talking about fellowship, we're talking about families, we're talking about the community. But I absolutely have retained new donors just because of that fellowship. Not even, this, we all know this, it's relationship building is what builds your business. So if there could be even a heavier focus on the beginning because we have a mentorship program of, hey, this is going to be beneficial for you professionally because it's beneficial personally, then maybe that's a good one. But on exit interviews, I was just thinking that maybe a professional reason column would make sense. Most of our members have their businesses paying for their membership, and that's why they leave, because they don't feel like they get that business return that first year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Does anyone, and it sounds like Jess, your club is, working on incorporating that piece. Do anyone else's clubs have a piece where they do, business sharing or sharing about businesses within their clubs that might just be some idea swapping opportunities here?
In our club in Columbus, I don't know if we've done it recently, but we traditionally have a meeting. We try to have a meeting once a year where everybody at the table tells everybody else what they do. There's no speaker for that meeting, and everybody goes around, and the president or our executive director, everybody gets like 5 minutes, and they'll to tell others at the table what they do. So we have had our club had much more of a focus over the last X number of years on trying to make sure that that the culture is is not anti your business. You know, as when I joined in the late 90s, and if you actually spoke about your business from the podium, you were fined $5. And that is not the case anymore. The other thing, because I agree, when I joined our Rotary Club, we had a membership committee, which was really all about acquisition of new members. And then we had a separate participation and retention committee. At some point, we put the two of them together because we felt that they were working a little too independently of each other. It didn't really, I'll be honest with you, it did not work well. I was one who thought they should be together at the time. And it did not work well because basically what I've always learned in membership, at least at the club level, is when you get a person's talking about membership at the club level in a meeting, it always ends up at acquisition. It rarely is there at least in the past, rarely is there a decent conversation about participation and retention. It always ends up back at how can we acquire more members, which we have to do, don't get me wrong. But I think it is best to have some kind of partition, people specifically focused on participation and retention. The other thing I think we really need to do is, as we have some kind of, whether it be a red badge program or some kind of way to integrate new members into the club, I really think we have to look, I would say on a quarterly basis at those new members to make sure that they are being integrated and not look, 9 or 10 months into their tenure and say, well, gee, have they been coming to service projects? Are they on a committee? Have they been, active in anything? I think sometimes we don't look at new members' journeys until it's too late. And we really need to start looking at their journeys earlier.
Steve and I are in the same club, and Steve, we are putting a special emphasis in the committee, even though retention is part of the membership development committee. We do have somebody in charge of retention. So while it's not broken out, but we've got somebody in every meeting we have, that individual needs to give us a report on retention on any members that seem to be wayward. We also have an interesting challenge where I think there are 17 clubs in Greater Columbus, Steve. Is it 17?
But in Franklin County.
Yeah, in Franklin County. And we're the only one that meets on Monday. And we find more members that find that Monday is a difficult day to spend maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours away from the office. So it's something we're discussing.
Well, we have and we have Sheila on in Athens, and they meet Monday at noon. I don't think anybody from Lancaster is on this call, but they also meet Monday at noon. Sheila, how is your club negotiating Monday at noon?
Sheila, you're muted. Hey, Sheila, you're muted.
Sorry. I haven't heard any complaints about Mondays. We used to have a judge who loved coming to noon meeting on Monday because he had such contact with criminals on Monday morning after the weekend. And he'd like to come to Rotary after that. So yeah, I just don't hear many complaints about Monday.
I think the reason we hear complaints is because we're serving Greater Columbus. So we have members coming from 35, 40 minutes away from Columbus to meet us in close to downtown. So they literally are spending 2 to 3 hours on Monday if they want to be at Rotary.
I would agree. We can get anywhere in Athens in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to share too an idea that actually I'm in Christie's club, and Christy did this thing, I don't know, a couple months ago. Our club does anytime there's we meet on Thursdays, and anytime there's 5 weeks in a month, that kind of 5th meeting is kind of a seminar educational thing. And Christy did one on kind of the status of the workforce. So, it was kind of high, her area of expertise professionally. And so I think that was, one small way to add kind of an interesting value, that if you weren't a part of Rotary, you really weren't getting this inside look at, the kind of workforce trends from someone who's an expert in the field. So I do think, asking the experts who are already in your club to educate, members about things, even maybe just adjacent to their business. I know we had a member a couple of years ago who did a whole session on, she's an attorney, I think she calls herself a recovering attorney, but she did an entire seminar on writing on wills and estate planning, and to kind of demystify that for people. So, just, kind of asking people to share about their expertise, I think to Jess's point is a good strategy.
Jen, it's been a while since we've done this in my club, but we used to have these vocational days where members of the club would sign up to host a group of club members at their business location, and they would get sort of a deep dive into that particular business. And those were fun. You'd learn more about the business, learn something maybe that you didn't know, and obviously get to know your fellow club members on a closer level.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know, and that, you might even, if clubs might even be able to buddy up with like local chambers and stuff, doing those kind of, hosted events. I know our club really enjoys anytime we get to go on a field trip somewhere. So that's kind of that's a cool thing. And it also is kind of a throwback to Rotary's beginnings, right? Of kind of going into people's places of business, and, sharing the hosting that way. All right, so I have one more nerd chart to show you. And this one actually is not district specific. The next chart I'm going to show you is from a survey that Rotary did a couple of years ago. And I will say this survey was pre-pandemic, so there's probably some pieces missing here, but I wanted to share that. So Rotary did a survey with people, and obviously this is just the number of people who elected to complete the survey. And these were the top 10 reasons that were listed for people leaving their clubs. Again, a couple years old. I think probably a post-pandemic survey would look a little bit different. But I wanted to show this to you. And again, this is, all of Rotary, so it's hard to guess how much this maybe impacts, with your club. But does anyone have any ideas of, let's break these down? Yeah, I know. Christy said, ouch. Yeah, and that it's a little ouchy to look at some of these reasons. And so, let's dive into a couple for the next 10 minutes or so. Is anyone, looking at one of these, perhaps one of them that's highlighted, have some ideas or thoughts? Christy.
Yes, I have some feedback on that. Well, Jenny and I come from a historical Rotary. Two of those reasons are right in the front and center, but I will say, like, just from personal experience, Jenny and I are very good friends, and personally we're close, but when you see us at Rotary, we are not sitting together. We are at other people's tables. We're talking to other people, and try really hard to steer away from that and not make people feel like they're not included in that communication. We have a couple of friends, really close friends that are like that within our, I feel like we just had a little holiday gathering at my house, and we were talking about what's other people in your life. I'm like, actually, I only hang out with Rotarians anymore. They're all my best friends. But I do think that you have those experiences and you talk about those things in the club, and it does make some people who are a little more introverted uncomfortable. And so I think we all had that moment where we talked about that. Like, let's not do that to people. Let's try our best to make sure that our experiences are our experiences, but in the club setting. because I've been one of those people too. I mean, I think we all have at some point, but it is, yeah, it isn't surprising to me, I guess, but I think inclusivity is such an important piece of Rotary, welcoming, making sure they get those connections. It's sort of the foundation of a positive experience.
Thanks, Christy. And Price, I see your hand up.
So it's not at the highest in terms of the total, but the one in blue really gets me because I think that is the key to engagement. And I think engagement is the key to retention. So, I mean, I feel like that's where if we could help clubs just really, work on that more and recognize its importance, we'll have more successful clubs. People will have a more positive club experience, and then everything else falls into place. Some of the relationships that I have with people in my club started from the superficial, sitting with them at a club meeting, to the real connection, standing beside them, working on a service project. I mean, some of those happen from a trip to Guatemala for our international project that we've got there. Those are life-changing relationship building experiences. But no matter what it is, whether it's 2 hours on a Saturday morning, those are just different kinds of interactions, right? So that feels like, I mean, I'm open and I want to continue to really drill into this to see if that's the key. But I feel like engagement is absolutely one of the keys. And I think it's a key to retention. And then everything else about club growth and giving to the foundation and everything else falls in place from there. That's my feeling, but I am certainly open to being challenged on that notion.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. Anyone else have any thoughts or reactions to what they see or I think, Christy and Price both, Christy kind of shared how our club tries to avoid some of these things very intentionally, and Price kind of sharing his insight. So if you have kind of a solution or an idea that helps mitigate some of these reasons, we would love to hear that as well. Sheila. And then
I had kind of a challenging experience when we were packing the Thanksgiving baskets. There were about 10 people there. We were putting the boxes together. And then when we got the boxes all together, we were waiting for the food to come. And I looked around and everyone was in a separate corner on their phones. And there was no interaction. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is terrible. So I didn't know what to do except to go around and talk to different people.
I think that's exactly what you should do, Sheila. You kind of just started the conversation.
Yeah.
It's interesting about
it was terrible. I couldn't believe it.
There's and I can't remember her name right now, but there's a book called The Art of Gathering, and it keys into kind of setting expectations at the front end. And one of the things that we might try and maybe need to try in those times is to set rules at the front end. We're not going to look at our phones except if we're taking pictures of other people working on the service projects. I mean, that sounds that might sound a little heavy-handed, but it also is going to create a more meaningful experience.
Yeah.
It's only heavy-handed if you are snapping at someone for having their phone out instead of, setting the expectations at the forefront. I think it's sort of fun and tells them that you care about their interaction with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
MJ, I saw you had started talking.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to reiterate or talk a little bit more about the volunteering and community involvement expectations. I think sometimes, and going back maybe to even onboarding and having that conversation, what the new members' expectations are. Because I know that a lot of clubs, mine, for example, we're doing a lot of the same projects, the same things, which there's nothing wrong with that because there's value there and the projects that we're doing are really impacting the community, but we probably don't do a good enough job at looking at other opportunities and maybe having conversations with our newer members as to what their expectations are or what their interests are. You know, maybe there's something out there that they're really passionate about and we're just not having those conversations and then supporting them with finding projects that would be meaningful to them. So I agree with Price, you know, the volunteering and that we need to make it more engaging, but I think it boils down to really having open communication and finding out what their expectations are, what their passions are, and then being open and willing to try new projects and go in different directions than we're traditionally used to doing.
Yeah, and you know, I think MJ, that's a really good point of, and there are some tools, I'll drop some links in the membership chat or in the chat about how to have those conversations, how to have those conversations and how to get that information. And you've all heard me talk about those, making those smart introductions with people in your club, like very intentional introductions between a new member. And it's that two-way, kind of a two-way orientation. So I think that that's really critical. I also think, you know, the other point about this aspect, that's highlighted in blue, is, you know, we're really, Rotary as an international organization is really looking at engaging younger generations, emerging professionals, younger professionals. And that's one kind, if you look at the profile of our younger demographics of members, you know, a lot of times Rotary is used almost as a brokerage to service opportunities. Because a lot of the, you know, kind of more traditional elements of membership are more easily and readily accessible elsewhere. Particularly, we have an emerging workforce that is more transient than ever before, even more so even in the last 2 years here. So a lot of times I think Rotary becomes that vehicle to get to know a community and then almost serves as this broker to other service projects. So I think constantly reading and adjusting and adapting is probably a really critical element in our membership engagement toolbox. Great.
You know, one of the things I find fascinating, Jenny, thank you, about putting up the reasons for why persons leave Rotary. I'm not a statistician, but from a statistical standpoint, my guess is, think that these reasons are all within 4% of each other, that it's not skewed like 75% and 3%. And statistically, it's amazing how, at the end of the day, how close each of these reasons is to each other.
Yeah.
Why persons leave.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one other point, by Christy, thanks for being here. One other point that I want to share is this is a survey that was sent and it was a voluntary opt-in. So I do think people who had a more personally hurtful or, you know, kind of had a more personal experience are probably more likely to complete the survey. So I do think that is an important caveat if you're, you know, nerding out on this too much. These, you know, numbers don't tell the whole picture. They tell a little bit different part of the picture than the first graphs, the first charts I showed you. But I do think, and the reason that I didn't highlight these 3 items, these were highlighted when the report was shared by Rotary. But I do think they do identify things that we can do something about, right? We can, you know, build inclusive clubs where people feel engaged and feel safe and feel welcome. And then I think the other one is that one highlighted in blue, because we can really do something about that. And it's also the thing that we're the best at, right? It's like one of our biggest strengths is engaging people that way. So that's why I wanted to share this with you. And these were just the top 10 that were pulled out. And this is actually part of a larger Rotary presentation that if anyone's interested in the full document, I can share that. I just got it back in September or so I'm happy to share that if anyone wants to look at it a little bit more closely. Similarly, the graphs I showed you relative to our district came from our district's membership profiles. I can also pull those per club. So if you would like to look at those for your club's own membership profile, where you can really dig into why and when are people leaving, I mean, there's a lot more on there. There's membership trends and looking at retention look backs, looking at specific demographics of members. So if you would like that for your club, just send me an email and I'm happy to get that report for you. Same thing, I know we have at least one assistant governor on the line. If you would like me to pull these for your clubs, the clubs that you work with, to assist in any conversations you're having with them, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to do that. It doesn't take any time at all for me to gather those for you. So being mindful of time, I know a lot of folks, their workday probably starts at 9, but I do want to have one last chance if anyone has an idea or a question or a problem or a great solution that they hoped we would talk about today, but we haven't gotten to. I wanted to give you a chance over the next couple minutes to share.
I'll share this. I don't know. Steve Sandbo, our assistant regional coordinator, made me aware in the last week of something called the Membership Growth Index that's used in zones 33, 34. Maybe they devised it, which focuses on how many new members have come into the club. They use a 3-year period. You could, and then how many members you've retained. So they do. It's a very interesting way to look at, and it can be scary, a very scary way to look at your club and see how well it's really doing. In looking at starting in that year 1, how many members are still in the club from year 1 to the start of year 4, let's say. How many new members have you acquired, and how many members have, who's left your club over those years, and who's of the new members who have left. Because there's the existing members when you start the analysis, and then there's also the members that come into the club during that 3-year period, and it's a very interesting way to analytically look and see how well you were doing at acquiring and retaining members. It's not overly complicated. You've got to figure out how to do it. But so if anybody's interested in that, they can let me know. Or I mean, Jenny may know of it. I'd never talked to you about it, but you may well know of it.
Steve, I've seen that. I've seen that analysis. Mm-hmm. My concern about that is I don't think it gets to the why. I think the why is the important piece here. And why do people get into Rotary? Why do people stay in Rotary? And if we can answer the why and all of the facets of the why, right? Mm-hmm. And also try to figure out how to filter out the current noise of COVID in all of this, because it's clouding our data in essence. We cannot completely understand where people's heads are on Rotary as a long-term commitment right now with all of the things that are happening in the world around us. But, so those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely valid thoughts. But the other thing I find in Rotary, some people they don't have an understanding of who are they losing, who are they gaining, are the new members staying in? I mean, they have, anecdotally they kind of understand, but when you actually look and see the numbers, then it may give you your club more of a focus on, okay, we've really got to do a better job on retaining new members, or we've really got to do a much better job on retaining existing members. It allows you to then focus, because it's just a statistical measurement. And you're right, Price. At the end of the day, it comes down to how do we engage our members, keep our members excited about being in Rotary. There's no question about it.
Thank you both for sharing that. And again, the offer stands to all of you, or to any clubs, that if you want to take a look at the data and the trends and then use that as a starting point to, you know, I always say, like, let's unpack the numbers, let's unpack the chart a little bit to get to Price's point, and then build some strategy around it. There's no shortage of resources and tools, both from our district and from Rotary International, that, you know, you can kind of be informed by the data, ask good questions of your members, ask good questions of yourself, and then build strategy using all of these tools. And there's no shortage of that, and I'm happy to do it. It's exactly what I volunteer with the district to do. So please take advantage of that. So I'll go to Sheila before I wrap up.
There's in our Club Runner, there's a list of active members, and then there's a list of inactive members, and I think it's people who have left the club. Has anyone had any success in going through that list and asking people to join again?
Yeah, I know of some clubs that have done that, where they've sat down as a board and decided who would reach out to those members, especially if it was someone whose life got busy and they kind of circled back around with them. So I know that there are definitely clubs that have done that, like, and used their board members to do that.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a good suggestion, and one that I definitely think clubs could, you know, revisit, especially if it's just a matter of, you know, life got real busy there for a couple of years. And it's easy, you know, to fill up the plate with other things. So kind of, you know, circling back around with those people to say, hey, Rotary is still here for you.
I like that. And maybe even being intentional about hosting a happy hour event or something where you invite all the alums to come to that, where they don't feel like they're being singled out. They're part of a larger group that's being invited, and they come and they have a great experience, and they say, why did I leave this group in the first place?
Okay.
Yeah, I think
That's a good idea.
And I agree with Price. I would add one more thing to that, Sheila. It might be that the Rotary experience of your club, for time reasons, cost reasons, whatever, maybe we had that list of reasons why people leave Rotary. And maybe one of the things you could offer them, if they don't want to join your club as is again, and that, you know, because some may and some may not, but offer them a different experience through a satellite club or something like that. Say, hey, you don't have to, you know, coming Monday at noon to our club meeting is not the only way that you can enjoy Rotary. We'd love to sponsor you in, if there's a different way that you think you might enjoy Rotary, let's explore that. Because if they're, especially as Price said, if they're coming to that happy hour with other terminated members, they obviously still have some passion for Rotary. Otherwise, they wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
And I would add too, you know, I'm a big fan of giving volunteer focused requests that focus on the person you're asking to do something, of why specifically you're interested in them. So maybe if you're having a service project and there were some past members who were involved in that, reaching out to them to say, hey, we're getting this service project going again. We'd love your expertise in getting involved with this. You know, most of you know, my job I work with volunteers, and we just re-engaged a volunteer who had been kind of retired from volunteering with us for about 4 years. And it was very specific. Some children that she had worked with 5 or 6 years ago came back open, you know, their cases opened again. So very specifically reached out to her to say, you know, this is open again. We're going to ask you first. And so she re-engaged, signed back on, completed her training, you know, all the stuff that she had to do to re-engage. But it was all about her, of kind of reaching out to say, you're really the best person to work with this family. That's why we want you to, you know, come. So, you know, I think, you know, making sure that we're not just reaching out to past members because we want to build our clubs, but really reaching, why do we want them specifically to re-engage is an important element of that. But that's a great, that's a great idea, and one that I think we can continue to build on and share with other clubs. So unfortunately, we are just about out of time. I do want to be respectful of everyone's day. As a reminder, here are the folks who volunteer for the district membership chair. or for the district membership team, we're all here to help. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. Any one of us are willing to do club presentations or to, brainstorm strategy sessions with your clubs. So please take advantage of that. Or if you have an idea and you really don't have, the time or the access to resources to build on that idea, please share it with us so that we can see if it's something that could benefit the entire district and work on that from our level. And then finally, I hope you enjoyed this and that this was useful. And then also please join us next month. It's January 19th as our next membership chat. And it's an evening one. It's at 6:30 in the evening. And next month's topic is on making Rotary family friendly. So we'll have some stories of success in making Rotary really family friendly and accessible to families. So, and I know a lot of clubs are really looking at this and getting creative with this. So please join us. Next month's will be much more seminar focused and less chatting back and forth like this. So we'll have tons of content and tons of resources and ideas to share with you on making your club as family friendly as possible. So otherwise, this will be up on the YouTube channel. If anyone wants any reports or anything like that, any of that data I mentioned, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help you with that. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a really great Tuesday.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. Great job
Thanks,
as
Jenny.
always.
Have a great day, everybody.
This
Like
is
the
great,
Oracle,
Jenny.
by the
Thank
way.
you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a great day, everybody.